What drives a man to challenge the greatest empire on earth? In 334 BCE, a young king barely in his 20s set out to conquer Persia, the land of Cyrus, Darius, and Xerxes. This was Alexander the Great, and his invasion would not only topple an empire, but reshape the world. Welcome to Crowns and Conquests. Kings rise, empires fall, but legends live forever. Subscribe now and join the journey through history. Alexander became king of Macedon at just 20 years old after the assassination of his father, Philip II. Raised as both warrior and scholar, taught by Aristotle, he believed he was destined for greatness. Yet the shadow of Persia loomed large. The Persian Empire was vast, from Asia Minor to Egypt, from Mesopotamia to India. And for Alexander, it was both his greatest enemy and his greatest opportunity. In the spring of 334 BCE, Alexander led about 40,000 men across the Hellespont. On the Asian shore, he offered sacrifice at the tomb of Achilles, his hero. Then came the first test, the Battle of the Granicus. Persian satraps and Greek mercenaries met him at the river. Against all odds, Alexander charged across and broke their line. Asia Minor was open. City after city fell. Sardis, Halicarnassus, and the wealthy ports of the Aegean. To the Greeks, this was revenge for Xerxes' invasion a century earlier. But the true challenge came in 333 BCE at Issus. Here, Alexander faced King Darius III himself, leading a massive Persian host. The Macedonians were outnumbered, yet Alexander's cavalry charge cut straight at Darius. The great king fled, leaving behind his chariot, his treasure, and even his family. For the first time, Persia looked vulnerable. Alexander treated Darius's captured wife and daughters with dignity, a calculated gesture to win hearts and claim legitimacy. Instead of marching east immediately, Alexander turned south. He swept through Phoenicia, defeating Tyre after a brutal 7-month siege. Gaza fell next. In 332 BCE, he entered Egypt as a liberator. The Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, welcomed him. At the oasis of Siwa, Alexander visited the oracle of Ammon. The priest hailed him as the son of Zeus Ammon, divine, chosen, destined. From this point on, Alexander carried himself not just as a king, but almost as a god. With Egypt secure, Alexander marched back east. In 331 BCE, at Gaugamela, he faced Darius again. The Persians had perhaps 200,000 men, with war elephants and scythe chariots. Alexander had barely 47,000. Yet through brilliant maneuver, he created a gap in the Persian line, led a cavalry wedge straight at Darius, and once again the great king fled. The Persian army collapsed. Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the beating hearts of the empire, fell into Alexander's hands. At Persepolis, he famously set fire to the royal palace. Whether a drunken act of revenge or a deliberate symbol of conquest, it marked the end of Persia's glory. But Alexander did not stop. He pursued Darius, who was eventually betrayed and murdered by his own satrap, Bessus. Alexander declared himself the rightful king of Asia. From there, he pushed further east, into Bactria, Sogdiana, and finally India. In 326 BCE, at the Battle of the Hydaspes, he faced King Porus, who brought war elephants against the Macedonian phalanx. It was one of Alexander's toughest fights, but he emerged victorious and even restored Porus as his ally. Yet his men were exhausted. At the Hyphasis River, they refused to march further. For the first time, Alexander had to turn back. Alexander returned west, consolidating his empire. At Susa, he staged the famous mass weddings between his generals and Persian noblewomen. He himself married Satyra, the daughter of Darius. He adopted Persian dress and customs, blending Greek and Persian worlds. But this alienated many of his Macedonian soldiers. Tension grew. Several conspiracies were crushed, trusted generals executed. In 323 BCE, at just 32 years old, Alexander arrived in Babylon, planning campaigns into Arabia. But suddenly, after a banquet and days of fever, he fell gravely ill. On June 10th, 323 BCE, Alexander the Great died. The conqueror of Persia, the man who had never lost a battle, was gone. His empire, stretching from Greece to India, soon fractured. Why did Alexander invade Persia? Revenge gave him a cause. Wealth gave him means. Ambition gave him direction. And glory drove him to the ends of the earth. He died young, but his legend endured. Greek culture spread across the ancient world. Cities like Alexandria flourished, and his name, Alexander, became a symbol of power, ambition, and conquest. So what do you think? Was Alexander a visionary who united worlds, or simply a young king blinded by ambition? Tell us in the comments, and join us again for more tales of crowns and conquests.